All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to take a look with the HD team here about our little web shop on DirectView LED. This is hopefully going to be the first in many that we're going to do, and just kind of covering those important topics and hopefully making DirectView LED for your applications a little less scary. We know how hard it is whenever you're trying, a new style. If you've already, been using projection for so many years or, standard flat panels for so many years, it can seem like a massive challenge to change to something new. And hopefully, Mark and I are here to make that process a little less scary for you and your organization. So our first topic, LED, how did you get here? We're going to go over a little back and forth on those key questions that you really need to ask before you even start the specification process. So with that being said, let's go ahead and just dive right into those questions.
All right, so this is one of the places that really takes a little bit of pre-work in order to make sure that you're getting the right solution, in the project. And Brittany and I, we've been around the block a couple times. We both worked for projection manufacturers. I've worked for video wall manufacturers like Barco and Chief. And so we understand there are multiple ways to do this. And sometimes just asking the right questions to land on the right technology, because we always want to recommend the right technology to the client first. And then if for some reason that doesn't work, then we work backwards into what would be acceptable kind of trade-offs as we go. And so Brittany and I really thought about this in a way that, there are really 4 key categories that you need to start asking questions of the client on. And those key categories are the room type, the brightness of the room and the actual kind of environment that the screen's going to go into, the longevity of the system itself. What does the client expect the system to last? How long do they expect it to last? And what are the conditions of that? And then what kind of content are you actually playing? And I think that's where we fail to ask a lot of questions sometimes, is on the content. We get an opportunity to put in hardware. We think about the hardware and we don't actually think about what's being played on it. And so that's a very important part as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not even just about asking these 4 questions. There's going to be times you're going to want to dive in a little deeper, because, you got your room type. Are we talking about, is this going to be like a stadium application or gymnasium? Are you looking at a boardroom? Just your standard boardroom, or is this more of kind of an open space auditorium type room? And then there's always the thing with retail environments as well. So, you definitely want to get your room type and then dive in a little bit deeper. And when they say boardroom, or stadium or retail or any other type of application, then you're going to want to move on to your next one, which is going to be your brightness. And, again, Mark and I've got that background in various types. So we know each room type is going to vary on brightness for multiple reasons. Is it a wall of windows? And I'm pretty sure you see this all the time, Mark, that, nowadays people are going with the architecture and they love that open space in those commercial buildings.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 things to consider here. So, when you're thinking about this, and I've got a little rant on resolution versus contrast. Like our brains as AV people are trained to think about resolution, right? We've been pounded figures through our heads. Is it full HD? Is it 4K? Is it 8K ready? Is it 16K ready? Like we're pounded on pixel count. But honestly, the first thing our eyes pick up is contrast. It's the first thing we see. It's like predator prey, right? Like you see a flashing light in the corner of your eye, your head jerks that way to see what's going on. And so our eyes are drawn to contrast first. And this idea of brightness in a space is very, very important, not only from will the screen be bright enough, but also for glare. Like if you're thinking about flat panel displays, and even if they have a diffusion layer on top to kind of reduce glare, if you're getting really bright reflections off of the glass from the display, how does that affect, how your content's viewed?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not even just the glare that can come in from your windows, but it can come in from your fluorescent lights. And then I think a lot of times people don't really take into consideration about the adjoining rooms. Is this a dedicated room that's closed off to itself, or is it something that can be opened up later where it's adding in additional brightness onto your display from an adjoining room? So, definitely these are the things that you do have to keep in mind, because you're right, Mark, when it comes to contrast, having too bright a room is going to help wash that out for us. And we definitely need to combat those things. So, once you've got your room type, once you got your brightness down, then we got to move on to the next important key thing, which is the longevity of the system. I mean, are they going to expect, is the expectation for your end user going to be days, months, or is it years? And in an ideal world, of course, it's going to be years. They're not going to invest into this type of system just for it not to work, a couple days or a couple months from now. So,
yeah. And I think part of this too is, so I think when we break this down, a lot of times when I was on the integration side, a lot of people would say, when you got into longevity, a lot of people say, well, we only use it a couple hours a day. Right. And so they started trying to think, well, how long is that? And they don't understand that there are other components that aren't just based on use. Like you were kind of trained in the projection world, like, oh, if I'm only using it a couple hours a day and the lamp lasts a couple thousand hours, then I can get 1,000 days out of this, right? In order to do it. And that was true in a way, but you also have power supplies, you also have filters, you also have wear and tear on equipment just over time because of environmental factors. That can make the technology selection more important when you're thinking about that. Obviously nobody buys anything to last for days, but I think the way people sometimes think about it is I'm only using it so many days, and they really need to think, well, just because you're using it that many days doesn't mean it's only taking wear and tear when it's on, because sometimes it's taking other things into effect there too. So
yeah, absolutely. And then finally, one of the most important things, and maybe we should have put this first instead of last, but content, because content is king. That's going to determine, your entire system, in my opinion. Even coming from a projection background, content was always, at the forefront of our mind. What are you going to be using this system for? Are you looking at still pictures like your PowerPoints, or your Excel spreadsheets or Word documents? Is that what the system is used for? Are we talking video 24/7? Is it just videos during meetings? Is it, if this is like a stadium application, how often are they going to be running, various content for different ads and so forth? And then another thing that's very important as well, how many windows? Are you going to be showing one still image on this system, or are you going to be needing to show various pieces of content at the same time?
yeah,
it's a very important thing to think about.
This one is the one where I think where you really dig in with the client, and like you said, even early on when you're talking to a client, you really want to talk to them about the outcome. What is this space supposed to do for you, right? And in order to do that, you have to know what they're actually playing on the screen. And I think sometimes we forget to ask this, right? Like we go in with our tape measure and our technology catalog, and we start designing based on the floor plan of the room. And we don't actually know what they want to do in there. And this is where you can really dig in. And if you really think about this, like let's say you're doing an engineering review, and this room is for engineering reviews. Well, if you're doing engineering reviews, you may want the most pixel density possible, right? Because you want to see every single pic. You took the picture on a 6K camera, and you want to see that image in the highest quality possible in order to see where there was a crack or where there was a failure or something like that, right? Like I did a heart hospital once where they were using rear projection, which was a great technology for what they were using, but they were using a short throw lens through a rear pro surface, and it was ghosting. And if you're doing a review of how somebody's arteries are working, you don't want ghosting in your image because you could misdiagnose somebody and they could die, right? So like the stakes can be really high depending on what's going on in the space. When we were talking about room type earlier, content makes a big difference with that too, right? Like if you're thinking about a boardroom and we're all doing remote work now, Zoom puts these windows wherever they want. If 10 of us sign in, it could put 9 of us and 1 at the bottom. And you don't want lines going through people in places that you don't want lines going through people. So you may want a bezel-less large format display, which means you either have to go with really ultra thin bezel video wall, which can be expensive, or maybe LED is the fit at that point because you don't want those bezel lines going through people's faces. Like one of my friends shared a funny picture of like, ironic kind of funny, but like whoever installed this did a bad job. It was like it was something presenting JFK, and there were certain times when his head went right across the center bezels and it looked like he had crosshairs on him, right? Like probably a bad thing to evoke when you're doing history of like a president, right? So you know, that content can be really huge. And like you said, for windowing as well. I mean, if you have a windowing processor or you're creating, you know, different kind of views of different content, that can make a huge difference as well in the type of technology that you use.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, how many times have we gone to those sports bars and they can only show one game at a time because they don't have the window capability on their huge, large display to do windows. So
yeah, or you know, you know, in certain places too, even when you're talking about video, canned content, like if somebody's doing PowerPoint or somebody's doing a presentation like we're doing right now, we can control what the background looks like, and we can control what the contrast between our text and the background is, right? And in places like a house of worship, let's say where you're considering projection, that may be the right fit if you're just projecting song lyrics, because you can put up a bright blue with white text and you can control those because you're creating both of those with light and you're not relying on black in the room or the contrast of the black in the room. But if you're doing something with video, video has a lot of shades of black and gray, and video tends to wash out very quickly if you don't have high contrast, and you can't control that, right? So you really have to think, okay, if this is the content that I'm showing in this space, even if I can get some modicum of contrast or color brightness, you know, is it going to be okay for the actual content that I'm showing? So
yeah, you know, like I said at the beginning, content is key, you know, and even though that all these key questions are going to go down into deciding what the best application is, you know, I really just feel strongly that content really needs to be a part of that discussion, you know, because like you said, Mark, a lot of times we're designing systems just based off room size and where your first viewer is, you know, and we just send them recommendations without even asking really what they want, you know, what is the end result, because you know I feel like that when you're not putting that in the forefront of your mind what the desired result is, you're already kind of setting yourself up for failure. Because sure, you can design a great system, looks fantastic aesthetically, you know, ticks everything else off, you know, like the brightness, it's going to last a long time, but when the end user goes to turn it on and their content's not working, I mean, what was it all for? So
yeah, and I had a really good, you know, example of this where, you know, I walked away from a $150,000 project once that a client wanted to give me because they wanted to do some rear projection with very high brightness projectors. And asking a little more about what they were trying to do, they were actually trying to do rear projection. They wanted to put these rear projection screens behind double glazed windows that faced, you know, north and west on a corner in LA. And you're like, okay, well, the sun bounces, you're never going to see those screens from traffic. Like the point was to try to get the content out into traffic. And, you know, we at the time, this was 7 years ago, so LED was not even in the ballpark of what it is today. So that's one of the other misconceptions. I think, you know, people should really start to get pricing on this stuff because it's come down a lot in the last 5 years, especially. But at the time it was too much for their budget. And they're like, well, these other guys are going to sell us the projection system. I'm like, well, that's great, but you're going to spend $150,000 to get zero result. Right. So like somebody will take, and I told them, I'm like, somebody will take your money and provide you that system. I'm just telling you, it's not a good use of your funds. Like, I don't care if you're buying nothing from me, do not spend that money on this type of technology because you will not get what you want out of it. And I think we need more of that kind of in our space of us really collaborating with clients, figuring out what they're trying to do, the impact they're trying to make, and the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, go ahead, just moving forward, you know, what our goal here at HD is to make sure that we have a happy end user. You know, it's great that if our, you know, integrators love us, you know, and that we're here for them and we're supporting them, but the goal shouldn't just be about the dealers who are buying from us, even though we're a distributor. It's all about the end user. And especially with direct view LED, as long as you're asking the right questions, specifying the right product, you know, keeping all these things in mind about the room, the style, your longevity, your content, you're going to have a happy end user. And then they're going to keep continuing forward with the technology, you know, and isn't that our goal?
100%. And I think, I mean, and as a teaser, I mean, obviously there are some finer details too, like when we get into, you know, how do you mount these things? How do you decide what the pixel pitch is? How do you take the content and make sure that you're getting the right technology behind it? And how do you process it? Do you need a controller? Do you need a processor? Those are the type of topics we're going to bring in the next 3 or 4 of these to really help you then get down in the mud in some very specific lanes of how you make sure that you're specifying this well all the way through, because there is a workflow that's involved and a signal flow that's involved, obviously, in AV, and we want to make sure that you know all the parts and pieces, not just the end screen, but you actually know how you're originating the content, how that content's being processed, how it's being pushed to the wall, how the wall's being put on the wall, and then how we make sure that we're getting the right pixel density so that people aren't looking at pointillism, a bunch of colored dots on the wall. So
I know it's always a little rough on the eyes. You can tell when you're too close.
yes, for sure.
Well, so again, I just want to kind of thank everyone for taking the time, taking a look at this video, joining us for this, like I said, the first of hopefully many. Mark, do you want to give a sneak peek on what the next topic's going to be, or should we wait till we release the teaser video?
Let's wait till we release the teaser video. We gave them an idea of what's coming. The next one we're going to put out here in the next couple weeks. And so we hope that people will bring us some maybe tricky applications or projects that they were thinking about LED. And even if it didn't go that way, we can talk about them and figure out, what the best, I guess, solution would have been for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, our goal is to just make this a little less scary for everybody. And, I think I've said it a couple times on social media and even in internal discussions that one of the biggest pushes right now in AV is this shift to direct view LED. It's popping up in more and more applications. People are talking about it. And like you said earlier, the price point is coming down. It seems like every couple years, it's just becoming more and more cost effective.
Yeah, I was just running some basic numbers based on dealer pricing, which isn't always market price, but I was running some basic numbers the other day. And, when you get up into the 165-inch plus area, especially at whatever distance you should be viewing a 165-inch screen from, which we'll talk about in one of our future as a teaser. But when you get up into that, direct view LED may only be a 20, 30 point delta, for all the extra advantages that you get. And then that's something you can actually talk to a client about. When it's 5, 6, 10x, like it used to be. I mean, the first time I saw 1.9, I think, was in 2015 at NAB. So about 6, 7 years ago now. And their 4K wall was about $1 million, right, for 1.9. And now we know in 1.9, a 4K wall is a tenth of that, probably, right? So those prices have come way, way down, and it's a lot more achievable than people might think. They just have to go through, like you said, a little bit of a learning curve, and we're here to take I guess, to flatten that curve. I don't like using the word flatten the curve. No, we're not flattening the curve. To take out the friction, to take those speed bumps out of your way, so you can make sure you capitalize on the market.
Yeah, we're going to move the hurdles is what we're going to do. So
yes, there you go. Move the hurdles. Olympics. I like that. Better.
All right. Well, until next time, Mark and I are going to sign off. But, just feel free in any of these web shops, chime in, ask us questions. We're always here for you, and this is what we do. We are focused on direct view LED. So come to us. We're here to help.
Right, y'all. Thanks so much.
Take care, everyone.